History was made this past Tuesday when voters in a Texas border congressional district, one that's well over 80% Hispanic, elected its first Republican representative since Reconstruction over 150 years ago. Former Democrat turned Republican Mayra Flores won the special election district in Texas and replaced a former Democrat, Congressman Philemon Villa Jr. As the Congresswoman-elect and many others noted, the Democrats' progressive values don't reflect those of the majority Hispanic border town and their residents.
They've gone so far left, and they don't represent our values. People always ask me, Mayra, how can you be a Republican whenever you were born in Mexico? And that clearly shows me that they know nothing about our culture. I was raised with strong conservative values. We're all about faith and family and hard work. That's who we are. So our values do really align with the Republican Party.
For a long time, congressional Democrats and the Democratic Party in general has assumed that the Hispanic community was a reliable voting bloc. They have consistently voted for Democrats over the last 100 years and certainly the last even recent decades. Does this election signal a shift? We've also seen lately where left-wing funds have purchased radio stations, Hispanic radio stations, that they are concerned have been influential in driving people to driving the Hispanic community specifically to the right. And so they purchased these radio stations ostensibly with the goal of preventing that influence from happening. We saw the Hispanic community break to Republicans consistently during the Trump administration. There was a lot of irony in that, perhaps for the left. There was certainly a lot of frustration in that for the left because they thought that Trump was going to incite the Hispanic community against him. And of course, the multiple allegations of racism over his border position, they assumed would drive the Hispanic community into Democratic voting arms. But in fact, we saw the opposite happen. And it's one of the reasons why the state of Florida has gone from a purple state to what most assume now is a reliably red state. So now that we have congressional districts in Texas on the southern border, congressional districts that are a supermajority, not just a majority or not just significantly Hispanic, but a supermajority, 80% plus of Hispanic voters, and they are now voting for Republicans. What does this mean for the future? Does this represent just something? Does this tell us only something about that particular district, or does this tell us something about the Hispanic community as a voting bloc across the country? After all, if the Democrats lose the Hispanic community as a voting bloc, if that moves to the right, that will completely confuse all of the demographic projections and all of the political projections moving into the future. And so the question we have, and what you heard there from Mayra, it's Mayra Flores. She is the Congresswoman-elect, former Democrat turned Republican. Do we have our guest? Okay, we do. And with me now to discuss all of this is FRC Action Director Matt Carpenter. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joseph. Great to be on.
Hey, good to see you. I was breaking this down a little bit, but I want to bring you into that conversation. How surprised were you in the 34th district results?
It certainly was surprising. I mean, I was listening in, and you were describing the supermajority, and if there was another word to describe orders of magnitude even higher than the supermajority, I think we would be using that word. But to put it into context, this is the second highest Hispanic populated district in Congress, and so now we should clarify this district was the previous district. And so after redistricting, Mayra Flores is going to have to run in an entirely new district, but she will have an incumbent's advantage there, speaking to voters, representing them for the few months up until the election. But I got to tell you, Joseph, there was an earthquake on Tuesday, and it went from Brownsville to Corpus Christi. But I think a lot of people here in D.C. and across the country, particularly in the Democratic Party, had a rough night.
Well, Matt, we played there that clip from Congresswoman-elect Mayra Flores. her analysis of what happened in that district. What's your take? What has caused this?
Yeah, I mean, she said it best, right? I mean, we can't speak for the Hispanic community, that they're speaking for themselves right now. And so we're just playing catch up, I think. But, the way she put it was, from what I heard, the Democratic Party left us, right? She campaigned on God, country, and family. And those are the three values that she struck. Those are the major themes of her campaign. And you heard it from her. She said the Democratic Party left us. We didn't leave them. And so the big story from the 2016 election was the white working class felt like the Democratic Party had abandoned them. It seems like we're getting closer and closer to another general election where another major part of the Democratic coalition feels like they've been abandoned as well. And the early signs are that is Hispanic voters, particularly in South Texas and South Florida, but also in places like Nevada and North Carolina and Pennsylvania, and most recently in Virginia, where we saw Glenn Youngkin cruise to victory just last year with a majority of Virginia's Hispanic vote.
Matt, it seems that these days, in order to be a Democrat, you have to be enthusiastic about partial birth abortion, about sex changes for 6-year-olds, about drag queens. And those values are not necessarily consistent with what the Hispanic culture is. And perhaps the white American elite progressives have completely misunderstood what the Hispanic community is about. But I'll ask you this last question. Do you think this represents a permanent shift in the way the Hispanic community will be voting?
Yeah, Joseph, I've been thinking a lot about this. And when you have one data point, right, and I would look at Trump's success in 2020, improving dramatically his standing in those communities by 10 points. Nationally. When you look specifically at South Florida and South Texas, we're talking 20, 25 points in some places. You have one data point. But once you move into another election, you have another data point, you can draw a line. And what we're seeing is the intensity is picking up. I think Hispanic voters are seeing that they have a place in the Republican Party, but not only do they have a place, but that they're going to actually get their hands on the levers of power within the party. They're going to start directing it towards their ends, and they're going to have their values represented in the Republican Party. And I think that's a benefit to our political system in general. Then it's going to lead to an exciting election season. That's for sure.
Matt Carpenter, thanks so much for your time.